Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is the Daily Knitter. My name is Tiffany and I'm a knitter from New Jersey in the US. In this video, I wanted to do my 2024 wrap-up, basically sharing every single thing that I knit in 2024. Now this was my first year of knitting. Small caveat, I actually learned how to knit when I was very young, around age 9 to 11. I don't quite remember, but since learning how to knit back when I was 9 or 10, I had not picked up knitting needles to really knit anything until April of this year was when I did a deep dive into knitting. So I do consider myself now an intermediate knitter, but back in April, I considered myself a beginner knitter, even though I technically knew how to cast on, knit, and purl, but I had never done any type of garment knitting or knitting anything for that matter, even like a scarf from start to finish. So I was very much a beginner, but I technically knew how to knit and purl. So I guess I was a little leg up from like a true beginner. And since then, I've been able to knit a ton. This is definitely my most time-consuming hobby and hobby that I spend the most time on. I would say in general, I'm a pretty crafty person. I like to do junk journaling. I did a lot of cross stitch and embroidery for a while. I've even dipped my toe into macrame, which is kind of like the weaving of like rope and stuff, like rope weaving, macrame. What else have I done? I've done so many different crafts throughout the year, and I tend to go down these rabbit holes with crafts and go really deep in depth into them and then usually move on to the next one. I will say that with this year of knitting, or really 8 months of knitting has become my number one love, and I've kind of put a lot of my other crafts to the side so that I can focus on knitting. And because of that love, I have now since started this YouTube channel, podcast, and also my knitting specific Instagram, and that's just been really, really fun for me and something that I plan to continue for as long as it keeps my interest, honestly. And I just have found a lot of joy in knitting, I think like a lot of you here. So I wanted to just offer a little bit of that background before getting into my actual completed objects. But I will have chapters like usual all the way down below. So if you're only interested in specific categories, you can jump to those, and let's get started. The first category I'm going to start with is sweaters. I think that's probably the most exciting. And I'm gonna go from chronological order of earliest completed project to last completed object, because the timeline kind of changes depending on cast on date, but I'm going to go with the completion date for all of these. I'm also going to be referencing my phone / Ravelry page because there are definitely some details of things that I might not remember depending on the project, and I apologize. But I will try to do either a bundle or link everything separately down below of every pattern. I think every single pattern I've knit you can find on Ravelry. So in case you are interested in a specific one, you can go there. Like I mentioned, I also do podcast episodes. So I have shared in depth every completed object that I'm going to share in today's video. So you might have to do just a little digging, but I only have 8 episodes up as of today anyway. So it's not a ton of digging that you need to do to, again, look for really in-depth explanations of the pieces. So what I'm going to focus on today is talking about my overall enjoyment of the knitting process and the wearing process of these garments. I will touch on how they're constructed, what yarn I used, if I can remember, and yeah, so I'm not going to go into like super detail of like every single modification I made or things like that unless it's like very relevant to the piece. So again, if you want in-depth information, I have lots of podcasts for you to check out. This is going to be more of an overview of everything that I knit. Starting off with my first completed sweater, and that is the Monday sweater by Petite Knit in this beautiful dark green color. I knit this up in the Sanisgarn Merino, which is their 100% superwash wool. And you'll see, I will just note at the top, you'll see a lot of Sandisgarn yarn in my collection because I actually live very close to Mother Knitter in New Jersey, and they are a mostly Sandisgarn yarn retailer. They are also apparently the only authorized wholesale or provider of Sandisgarn in the US, I think. So they have like this huge warehouse, I think, under either in the basement or something, and they ship a lot of Sandisgarn to your local yarn shop. So if you see Sandisgarn in your local yarn shop, most likely it actually comes from Mother Knitter, which is very cool. But obviously they have a ready supply of, I think, Sandisgarn's entire line essentially. They also do carry a handful of some other yarns like Lamina, or Lamana, I don't know how to pronounce that. Scout is another one, and a few local ones, but Sandisgarn is definitely their biggest inventory, hence why I have a lot of Sandisgarn yarn, because it's easy to just go there and pick up yarns. So wanted to mention that off the top as well. Like I said, this is the Monday sweater by Petite Knit. It's a top-down constructed raglan sweater knitted completely in the round with German short rows. It incorporates this 3-stitch raglan detail that I really like. I think it looks really polished, and it has a folded down 1x1 ribbing neck where you kind of like double knit, you like knit a longer piece and fold it down, as well as ribbing on the bottoms and the sleeves. Pretty easy construction. I feel like this is a sweater that a lot of folks get recommended when they're a beginner because it's constructed completely in the round, raglan. It's relatively an easy pattern to read, all in stockinette. There's not a ton of like hard techniques you need to do. I would say the German short rows is probably the most difficult aspect of it, but there's so many tutorials online in video format or written format that you can read that explain it really well. And that's what I did. I just followed, I think Petite Knit has like a knitter that does all of her tutorial videos, and I just followed that one for the German short rows and found it very easy to follow. So yeah, I knit this in the smallest size. It did grow quite a bit. I will say I think the Marinol yarn tends to bloom. I think superwash yarns in general tend to stretch more, which I don't think I realized. So yeah, but even then it actually fits well, and I can actually still wear this in my second trimester currently, and it still fits over my bump. It's a little short, but not too bad. So I do think this came out slightly larger than I was expecting, but it still creates like a really nice drape. And I will say the superwash yarn is really, really soft, and it's meant so that you could machine wash it and you don't have to be super delicate with it. So I think there's something to be said about superwash wool, even though I think a lot of traditional knitters maybe frown upon it or don't really use it that much. But as my first completed sweater piece, I thought it was a good yarn to go with, and it's really nice and soft, and I really like this sweater. I could easily see myself knitting another Monday sweater. I will probably do a what I am planning to knit in 2025 video, so I'll go into more detail there of some of the patterns, but I did really enjoy this, and I do think it's a nice beginner friendly pattern. Next up is my step-by-step sweater by Florence. I think she's known as Handmade by Florence. She also has a YouTube video where she has really in-depth tutorials. This is the pattern that she wrote and published, and also has a step-by-step tutorial on YouTube for. So I would actually suggest this as an even more beginner-friendly sweater than the Monday sweater, purely because she does such a great in-depth tutorial on this, and it's truly meant so that you can just follow along the YouTube video if you're a beginner to knitting and knit an entire sweater, which I think is just such a great concept. And I thought the pattern was really well written. And yeah, so this was actually the second sweater that I knit, even though going back, I probably would have preferred to knit this one first. I knit this in the Yarn Bee yarn in Soft and Sleek. I think it's a 100% acrylic yarn. I don't quite remember, but it's in the colorway Parisian Light, which is this striped, I guess it's not quite a self-striping yarn. It's variegated, I think that's the name. I sometimes get some of these like names wrong, but it's meant to create this kind of striped look, and I picked this yarn on purpose because I wanted a sweater that almost mimicked a color work, but that I didn't have to do actual color work for, which I think I achieved. However, this sweater is teeny tiny. I knit this in the smallest size, I think, but I think because I got so scared after blocking my Monday sweater that it grew so much that I had no knowledge at this point of yarn fiber and composition and this and that. So I just assumed that the sweater would also grow by that much once you wash and block it, which is not the case. So if you are knitting on 100% acrylic yarn, it is really not gonna grow. The stitches do bloom a little bit and lay a little flatter than right when it comes off the needles, but it is not going to grow like superwash. So I just knitted this one so small and it didn't grow at all. I don't know if you can tell by the photos that it looks really cropped. I don't think it looks that small on me in the photos, but I just think over time it's even shrunk a little because I haven't worn it in so long, but I don't know. Anyways, this is constructed top down, completely in the round. The pattern gives you options to do German short rows or not. So if you are a super beginner and don't want to bother with German short rows, you don't have to. And like I said, she does like a very good tutorial on every single step of the pattern. So yeah, and even just as someone who now is like an intermediate knitter, I would definitely knit this sweater again. I think the benefit of this one is that it has a thicker gauge. So I think it's maybe 16 stitches, 16 stitch gauge versus the Monday sweater is a DK, it's like a true DK weight and it's like more closer to 20. Yeah, this is considered like an Aran weight sweater because it's 16 stitches on like 4.5 millimeter needles. So it just depends on like what kind of look you're going for. And I love a chunky sweater, so I would definitely knit this again and find like a nice thick chunky yarn, probably a wool or cashmere yarn to knit this with. And I think I'm gonna gift this to my niece, if not this Christmas, then maybe for her birthday. She's 5 years old, but she's like a tall 5-year-old. So I actually think she could almost wear this now, honestly, as like a little oversized sweater. But yeah, definitely enjoyed knitting this, and it knits up so quickly because the gauge is so large. And I will say, even though the yarn is not like, you know, it's just an acrylic yarns are super soft, and this yarn is very soft. So I think if you're really sensitive to wool or you can't tolerate wool or cashmere, you should look into acrylics. I think people, you know, look down on acrylic yarns because they're cheap or they're made out of like plastic and stuff, but there are plenty of people who can't tolerate wool, and I don't think you should overlook acrylic yarns just because, you know, other people do. And it's also cheaper. It's like at a much more affordable price point. So this sweater probably costs like $15 to make versus my Monday sweater cost me like at least $80 to $90. So there's a pretty big difference in price as well. The third sweater I completed is the Ingrid sweater by Petite Knit. This is actually the junior pattern, and I decided to purchase the junior size because if you look at the sizing, the largest size in the junior, which I believe is like maybe 12 to 14-year-old, is actually the same size as the smallest women's size. So if you were like me, I wanted to be able to knit this pattern potentially for the children in my life, so my nieces or my son, and, you know, just other children. And I figured because I would probably be knitting it for myself, I could still knit the largest size junior and then still be able to use the pattern for smaller sizes. So if you're petite like me, I'm 5 feet tall and about like 100 pounds when I'm not pregnant, then I would actually suggest just going for the junior pattern, especially if you plan to knit for even smaller sizes. That's just kind of like a hack, I guess. But I did myself dirty and way underestimated again how much this would grow post blocking. And so I knitted like the second to third largest size rather than just knitting the largest size, and it's definitely too small. I'll show you the photo. This is of me pre-pregnant. It's definitely a cropped, almost zero ease sweater. And then I'll show you another photo of now that I'm pregnant. It's like a true crop sweater, which I actually think looks really cute now that I'm pregnant. And it's very festive because it's red. But if I am going to knit this again, I'm definitely gonna just knit the largest size and have it be like a true sweater size. I will say I did not knit the largest size because I didn't want something super oversized, and a lot of the versions I was seeing online of people knitting the smallest women's size was still giving them a really big sweater, and I think that just freaked me out. I think I just, again, overcompensated for how big I thought the sweater pattern was gonna be, but I should have just knitted the largest size in the junior. But regardless, I'm still really proud of this piece. This is constructed a little different. You actually knit the back panel first, then you pick up stitches for both shoulders right around here. You knit the front, then you connect the front panel, you knit the panel, and then you connect both panels in the round right where, you know, the underarms would be, and that gives you an almost like unfinished vest look once you're done with the torso. And then you pick up and knit the sleeves, and then you finish the neck, and this one has a double folded neck. And yeah, the different patterns are actually created just by knits and purls. So you have a whole double moss stitch section, then you have the eyelets, then this diamond pattern, then another eyelet, then 2x2 ribbing. And I believe the women's size pattern has all the same sections, but they're ordered slightly different, I think, depending on the size you make. So just keep that in mind in case you were looking for like the exact one that she wears in her photos. Like the junior one's gonna look just slightly different, I think, depending on the size that you make, but it still has the same motifs. So that's like a small detail. But yeah, I still really love the way it looks out. I can't decide yet if I'm going to just gift this to one of my nieces or if maybe I'll save it for my son. I mean, red is such a nice like gender neutral color, so I feel like he could wear it for Christmas one year or something, so I'll probably keep it. And I would knit this pattern again, but I just purchased her storm sweater pattern, which is her other pattern that is done in just knit and purls, and it's a textured pattern. And I like the storm sweater a little bit better because it doesn't have these eyelet details. And I don't know if you'll be able to tell from the photos that I put of this on, but if you are wearing a bra, whatever color bra you're wearing will show because the eyelets are just holes. And so you either have to wear, you know, a nude color underneath, but then that looks like you're not wearing underwear or just looks like you're flashing people, or you'd have to find, you know, the exact color of your yarn undershirt to wear, but then you don't really get the eyelet effect. So I'm not quite sure if that's the same problem that people experience when they knit the women's size one versus the junior, but just the way the junior one lays on me, the eyelets almost land right above my nipples, so it just looks a little odd, I think, without an undershirt underneath. So because of that, I don't know if I would knit myself another Ingrid sweater. I might just knit the storm sweater for myself because that sweater doesn't have any eyelet details from what I can remember. But regardless, I'm still really proud of this piece. I think it came out really well, and I think the yarn that I chose is, which I did not even mention, sorry. The yarn is Sandiscarn Double Sunday in Scarlet Red. Again, this beautiful bright red shade. And I just love the way the stitches pop with this color. I want to pat myself on the back for picking a yarn that really makes the stitches pop. And it's a beautiful yarn. So if you're looking for inspiration for the Ingrid sweater, this bright red is beautiful. And I still really love this piece, even though it's a little too small for me to wear. Now, the last sweater that I knit for myself is the All Fall sweater in the smallest size, which I think is just an extra small/small. I actually did this as part of a test knit. It's by Casual Knit Studios. She has an Instagram. I don't think she does YouTube, but I know she has an Instagram, and she put out a test call on her Instagram, which I signed up for and got selected for, surprisingly. This is my first and only ever test knit. I think I would definitely do it again. I keep my eye out and stuff. I'm not like jonesing to do it again just because you kind of have deadlines that you need to hit, but I did really, really enjoy the process, and it was really fun just seeing everyone else's progress, everyone else's finished projects, and getting advice, as you go, especially doing new techniques, which this sweater was definitely very new for me. And the reason is because this is actually constructed from the bottom up, and in her pattern, in the same purchased pattern, there's two ways you can construct the sweater. One is bottom up in the round, and the other is, I think, still bottom up, but in panels, and you can seam them together. And she gave the test knitters a choice of what they wanted to do. I prefer to knit in the round, so I chose that. And I had never constructed a garment from the bottom up before, except for my first piece, which was a tank top that I'm not even gonna show in this video because I threw it out, and it was like the first piece I ever knit, and that was technically bottom up, but that piece was so bad, like I said, I don't even have it anymore to show you. But yeah, it was fun to do something new. So constructing from the bottom up, and then at the underarms, you essentially split and do the back panel, and then you do the front panel. And the way you actually like seam it together or knit them together is what gives you this really cool shoulder detail. So I hope you can kind of see, but it's essentially this big wide panel here, and you knit it together, as you go. And that's how you knit the sweater together, and then you eventually pick up for the sleeves and continue knitting the rest of the sleeves. But I think it just creates this really pretty detail along the shoulder, which almost looks like a raglan, but not quite. And that's what drew me to the pattern in the first place and why I wanted to test knit it. So I also used double Sunday in taupe for this. Again, I love that double Sunday yarn. It's just like so soft. So I already knew that I wanted to knit it with that, and I was able to hit gauge with that yarn. It's a classic kind of DK weight sweater. I would totally knit the sweater again. I wear this all the time, even through pregnancy. So actually in the photo that I show, I'm technically pregnant in that photo because I finished this right at the end of my first trimester, or beginning of my first trimester, I think. Yeah, because it published on October 1st. And so I was definitely in the thick of my first trimester, but I was able to get enough knitting done towards the beginning when I wasn't as symptomatic, so that by the time I had finished this, I just had to finish the sleeves, even though I was so sick and I basically wasn't knitting anything else. And I just was focused on finishing this in time for the publishing of the pattern. But yeah, I'm technically pregnant in that photo. But I love this sweater. Again, I wear it all the time, and I even wore it 2 weeks ago when we went to like a holiday party, and people always give me compliments on it, and I always, of course, tell them that I made it, because you have to show off, and they're always like so shocked. They're like, oh my god, you made that? That's crazy. But yeah, absolutely love this sweater. Highly recommend. Definitely go check it out. Now on to the last sweater that I knit, but technically this is not for me. This is for my husband. This is the first piece that I've ever knit him, and it's the Melange Sweater Man in the size large by Petite Knit. And I knit this in the suggested yarn, which is 2 strands of Tin Peer Gynt by Sandisgarn held together to create this beautiful melange look. So you essentially hold one thread that's light and one that's dark, and that creates this beautiful contrast. You could also do it in a solid color. You could do it in any color combo. She has a variety on her page of different variations that she does with different yarns to get different types of effects. I can't remember if I think this is very close to one that she knits that she has photos of that I was drawn to, and I just took my husband to Mother Knitter and had him pick out the colors that he wanted. And I think this cream and kind of like gray brown color creates this beautiful look. I love the way this sweater came out. It took me forever. I am going to be featuring this in my next podcast video because I technically finished this about 3 or 4 days ago, so I haven't talked about it in depth yet. But it's essentially constructed similarly to a lot of Petite Knit sweaters where you cast on for the back, you knit it flat, Then you pick up for the shoulders. You can see the melange makes it, the melange is actually very forgiving. So I actually think it's a great option for beginner knitters because it really hides a lot of flaws that you might have. So you pick up for the shoulders, you knit the front panel, you join in the round, and then you do the sleeves. And then you finish the neck like that. And I think it just looks so beautiful. It's so simple. I would definitely knit him this pattern again, and I could knit it, you know, in a solid color or in a different yarn. The Peer Gynt is pretty rustic, so it's a little scratchy, but he's not super sensitive. So I had him kind of like test it out against his neck in the store, and he felt like it was okay. But when he did try on the final product, he was like, yeah, like right when you put it on, it feels a little scratchy. But it's not itchy. I feel like there's a difference between an itchy yarn versus a scratchy yarn. And I have heard from a lot of people that with the Peer Gynt line, the more you wear it, the more you wash it, the softer it gets. So I'm not too worried. He wore this out for dinner the other night, and I kept asking him, I was like, how are you feeling? And he was like, it feels fine, it feels fine. So I'm glad that it's comfortable for him. And yeah, it's just a beautiful piece, and I'm so happy I finished it. It took me so dang long. I cast this on before we even left for Switzerland. So I think it was like around my birthday, potentially even like the end of June I cast this on, and I didn't finish this until, like I said, 3 days ago, which is like December 19th or 20th. I will say I took a 3-month break in between because of my first trimester. I really wasn't knitting anything because I was so sick. So I will give myself some slack there. But this obviously took me a lot longer than knitting something for myself because my husband is 5'11" and a bigger guy. So I had to knit him the size large. And again, I've never knitted anything this large before. So it was quite intimidating. And towards the end, just a sneak peek, I had to redo a lot of the ends, and I'll talk about all my woes again in the podcast episode. So subscribe if you want to hear about the trial that this has been for me. But yeah, like I said, it just took forever to knit. So I would love to knit him more pieces in the future, but even the whole time today, I was telling him, I was like, you better wear this dang sweater every day in the winter because it just took me so long to make. But I just think it looks so good on him. So that does make me want to knit him something else. And yeah, I liked working with the Tin Peer Gynt. It's like, again, it's a rustic yarn, but it's really fun to knit with. It's a little splitty, I will say. So at some points it's like a little hard to work with in that sense. So I do think if I knit him another sweater, I'll probably go for like Sunday held double or just do double Sunday held single. But yeah, really, 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 really proud of this piece. It doesn't even fit in the screen. That's how big it is. But I'm very proud of myself for finishing this piece for him in time for Christmas. So that was definitely my most knitted category, I suppose, is sweaters. So not every category is going to be that packed moving forward. But let's get into tops. And in tops, I'm still going to further split that up into long sleeve tops, short sleeves, slipovers, and then lastly we'll do accessories. So in the long sleeve top category, I only have 2, and they're actually the same pattern by Petite Knit. This is the Cloud Blouse by Petite Knit. And I knitted this, I believe, in the size small, and this one in the size extra, extra small. The Cloud Blouse, I think, is one of her slightly newer patterns, so she has more size inclusivity in it. So I think it goes from like an extra, extra small to like maybe triple XL or something like that, which is nice. And my vision for the first one that I cast on was to have a nice light to medium weight cotton beach throw. That was kind of the vibe. If I can find like an inspiration picture of like what I'm thinking about, I'll put it here. And I think I pretty much kind of created that look with this yarn choice and this silhouette. So the way this is constructed is similar to the melange, where you knit the back flat, you pick up for the shoulders and knit the front panel, then you join under the arms, go in the round, finish the sleeves, and finish the neck. Yeah, and then you finish the neck. The more unique part of this blouse is that instead of a traditional ribbed edge, she has you do a little bit of ribbing, but then you knit and then you bind off. And so it creates this kind of rolled over look, this more rustic look that I really, really like. And that's the same for the bottom hem as well. And then the neck is also just like a handful of knitted stitches and then you just bind off. So it also creates this rolled over effect. And I just really like that look. I think it looks really chic, but kind of casual. I don't know if that makes sense. And also the sleeves, instead of a more traditional tapered sleeve with ribbing at the end, it's almost like a big rectangle. There is a little bit of decreases that you do, but not quite as many. And so you get this beautiful, more wide sleeve, which I think is very popular now. So yeah, I think this was like a very popular pattern when it came out. And she also creates this in a sweater version, which I will probably at some point purchase and make because again, I just like the silhouette of it and I would love to have this in a sweater weight. But yeah, let me see. The yarn that I used for this is another Yarn Bee yarn, I believe. Yeah, it's the Yarn Bee Bambootiful. It's a linen it's a bamboo yarn. This is in the color linen. It's a bamboo yarn, so it's super soft. And I just wish this yarn was more fun to knit with because I think this is like, again, it's so soft. So if you were sensitive to wool or cashmere or anything, like you could definitely wear this next to skin and it literally feels like butter. But because of that treatment, I think when you're knitting with it, it's very unforgiving. It's a little hard on your hands. I didn't necessarily like cramp or anything, but I will say the knitting experience of this compared to a Sanascar Double Sunday is totally different. Like the Double Sunday is just a dream to work with, and this one is just not quite as nice to work with. It's just unfortunate because again, the fabric that you get out of it is very drapey and soft. So I just wish it was a little nicer to knit with. I will also say the light color is very unforgiving. So I think this is probably one of my least neat looking knits because of that. I mean, this was like an earlier knit piece that I knit in my knitting journey. So that being said, I do think there's some variation there that's probably just due to my variations in my tension. But again, I think the yarn color in this light color is pretty unforgiving. But that being said, the purpose for this was just to use as a beach/pool throw over, and I wore it a lot and it worked perfectly for that. And again, because this is like a very hardy yarn, I could toss this in the wash. I've machine washed this. I've worn it through like salt water on my bikini to like pool water and chlorine. And I think, even it took a beating, but I think it still looks pretty good even after taking a beating all summer long. So it definitely fulfills the purpose that I had envisioned it in my wardrobe. And because of that, I did wear this a lot. And I plan to wear this all of next summer as like my throw over when we go to the beach and stuff like that. Because it's just nice to have a long sleeve sometimes. Like, 'cause sometimes I think it's like a little chilly right when you get out of the pool, even if it's a hot day. And so just having something that's like cotton that you can throw over is nice. So I'm really glad that I knit this, and it's probably one of my most worn pieces because of that. Then, like I mentioned, I pretty much immediately cast on another one because I just loved the pattern so much. And this one I knit, like I said, in the extra small size. And the yarn, did I even put the yarn on here? I did not. Sorry about that. Some of these earlier pieces that I knit, I just wasn't as good as keeping track. I'm pretty sure it's a Yarn Bee yarn though. I think it's one of their like baby yarns. So it's like baby soft. So it's 100% acrylic. And I could not tell you the colorway. Actually, if you go on my Instagram, I probably have the information there. So anyways, it's an acrylic yarn. It's this very lightweight, airy fabric. And it's a nice variegated yarn. So it almost gives, again, that color work look without being color work. And I really like the effect of this. I really wish they made this yarn in like a wool, because like I think it would just hold the structure a little bit better and would look nice, but I do still think I like the way this turned out. I did bring this with us on our trip to Switzerland, and I wore it a decent amount on that trip. And I think, again, because it's acrylic, it wore pretty well. It doesn't pill nearly as much as like some wools or cashmere, so that's a nice thing about it. But yeah, again, same exact construction, just a smaller size. And I wore this piece a decent amount. I think now, obviously, because we're in the dead of winter, this is definitely way too thin to be wearing around. But I would love to knit, like I said, a cloud sweater, which is the exact same pattern and look, just in a sweater weight. But I could easily see myself knitting another cloud blouse in like a lighter merino wool or something, or cashmere even, and just creating different looks. It's just like a nice pattern, and I love the way that it looks. All right, if the screen has now shifted angles, it's because I have to charge my camera while I'm filming, and the cord doesn't quite reach, so the camera's technically far away, but I zoomed back in, so I'm hoping it doesn't look quite so different as the position I was just in. But if you see a difference, that's why. Moving on to the rest of my tops, I will do my t-shirts and then slipovers. T-shirts, I also only have two. This one is the Tombow tee by Handmade by Florence. She has a YouTube channel. She's the one that did the step-by-step sweater. And I think she's like pretty popular, I don't know, in the knitting sphere, but this is her Tombow tee pattern. And this is technically supposed to be a fingering weight t-shirt, but because this was one of the earliest pieces I cast on, I think I actually finished this before I even cast on my Monday sweater. I was really intimidated by that fingering weight gauge, and so I just ignored it completely and decided to purchase a yarn that was not quite fingering weight. I think this yarn, this is the Paint Box Yarns in Cotton Mix DK. So it literally says DK in the name. I don't think it's quite as thick as like the Double Sunday yarn. It's probably like in between a Double Sunday and a fingering weight. So I think it's about 23 to 24 stitches, stitch gauge, versus again the original pattern calling for a 27 to 28 stitch gauge, I believe. But anyways, this is in the color dark chocolate, and the Tombow tee pattern is written so that you can knit it with stripes, but you can obviously just omit that if you wanted to do a solid color. And since this was like the first garment I was going to be knitting, I obviously decided to eliminate the striped piece to just make it simpler for myself. And yeah, let me see how this is constructed, because like I said, this is like the first piece I knitted. I don't even remember how I knit this. It's knit top down, okay, flat at first to shape the neckline, then in the round, which is kind of what I remember. So I think similarly to some of the other patterns, you cast on the back first, and then you at some point connect it in the round, and then do the sleeves. Yeah, and it has just like a very simple ribbed, 1x1 ribbed edge on the sleeves and on the bottom, as well as the neckline. And I knit this in the smallest size, but again, because the gauge, I did not meet gauge at all. This is like a much more boxy t-shirt than what she looks like wearing. Like hers still has positive ease, but I think it's more like 4 to 5 centimeters of positive ease, versus this one is like a super boxy t-shirt on me. You know, that being said, I still love the way this looks, and I wore it a lot once I finished knitting it, because I think I completed this around the beginning of summer. Yeah, around the beginning of summer, and so I was wearing it, you know, like around that time. Let me see when I actually finished this. Of course, I have no date set. Again, this is like, I have very little Ravelry details on some of these pieces. But anyways, I must have like finished this in like May, because I wore it all through May and June. And I got a lot of compliments on it actually, because of the color, and this like brown color is very trendy right now. It's like this rich chocolate brown. So I do still like this piece, but again, it's like, a way different version of the Tombow tee because I did not meet gauge at all. So if you were to knit the Tombow tee, it's not gonna look like this. This definitely looks closer to like a DK t-shirt than what she has envisioned for the Tombow tee. I think at some point I will re-knit the Tombow tee, and maybe I'll do it in stripes because I have not dipped my toe into stripes at all, and a t-shirt might be nice because then you're not doing the sleeves all the way as well, and you can, it's like a nice way to like dip your toe into something. So I have the pattern, I purchased it already, so it's there for me to use, but that is my Tombow tee. This next t-shirt is the Cumulus Tee O-Neck by Petite Knit, also a very popular pattern on Ravelry. I did shorten the sleeves quite a bit, so compared to what she looks like, her t-shirt sweater goes all the way down here, but for me, I just don't like that sleeve length. I think it cuts me off weird, so even pre-casting on, I knew I was going to adjust the sleeve length. But she also has this in a V-neck version. I think the V-neck version is the one that came out first, and I never wear V-necks. I do not like the look of V-necks on me at all. So when I saw that there was an O-neck version, I decided that this would be like my re-jumping into a lighter summer weight knit. And this is done on a true actual fingering weight yarn. This is the Mayflower Easy Care Merino in the color Chinois Green. And this stitch gauge is, let's see, this is mostly knit up on 3mm needles with 2.5mm needle ribbing. So it is a true light, like a fingering weight shirt. And this also took me quite a while. I cast this on actually a long time ago, and then I just got so frustrated with knitting it. It's knitted completely in the round and with raglan details on either side. So it's like a very easy construction, but because of the fingering weight, it just took forever to grow. And of course, that's, I think something that all us knitters deal with is like when you're knitting something in a fingering weight, it's just not as satisfying because it takes so long for things to happen. So I actually ended up getting to the point of knitting. Was I knitting into the round already by the time we went to Switzerland? I can't remember quite when I paused. I think it was either after I'd done all the raglan or like halfway through the raglan. I ended up pausing and not working on it and working on a ton of sweaters. So basically all the sweaters I showed was like post casting this on. And then I almost frogged it, but then decided not to. And then at some point one day, I just got the inspiration to like pick it up again, knitted a decent amount, got it to the point, I think then in the round fully to where just the body was left. And at that point we were scheduling our Switzerland trip, and I was like, you know what? That's the perfect trip to finish this on because the yarn is like so small and lightweight. It was easy to pack, so it didn't take up that much space. And I just knew we would have a lot of downtime for me to be knitting. And at that point, I had already knitted multiple garments under my belt. And so I figured if I only brought one thing to finish on that one trip, that it would motivate me to knit because that's the only thing I had to knit. And it worked because I was able to finish this t-shirt on that trip with even some spare time. So I think moving forward, if I decide to do another summer knit, that's just what I have to go with. I have to cast it on and bring it on vacation, and that's the only thing I get to work on, and that's probably the only way I will finish it. But I'm so glad I did because I really love the finished product. This yarn is like really nice and airy, and I just love the look of this t-shirt. Would definitely knit this again, maybe in like the Sandiscarn Line or like Tin Line, I guess. I would like the linen yarn. I'm just not sure how forgiving the linen yarn will be. It might be not as forgiving, so it might not look as good, but I like this weight. I was also able to wear it on that trip, and I don't find that it's too hot, even though it's 100% merino wool, because it's a fingering weight. It's pretty airy, so I think you could definitely wear this in the summer. Definitely depending on, where you are in the summer, in like 100-degree weather, probably not, but in like 75-degree weather, sure, I think you could get away with wearing something like this. So it's pretty versatile, even though it's like a, light fingering weight you know, yarn. But yeah, it has I-cord edging on all the ends actually, which is also a new technique that I had to learn with this shirt. So that was kind of fun to do for the first time. And yeah, I just absolutely love it. Can't wait to wear it again next time around. The last category for tops is my pullovers or vests. And the first one that I knit is actually this. It's not quite a test knit because it wasn't test knit for petite knit, but it was like a test knit for myself. And this is the Lulu Slipover Junior. Sorry, it just looks like a big black blob because it's basically just a black yarn and the camera's kind of far away, but I hope you can see some of the speckling in the yarn. This is the Lion brand yarn. Let's see if I put it in here. Lion brand Heartland yarn in the color Black Canyon. It's a 100% acrylic yarn. It's probably closer to a worsted weight. You can maybe get away with knitting this as a DK weight, but this slipover is meant to be a DK weight, and I felt like knitting with 3.5 millimeter needles created like a pretty dense fabric. So I would say this is closer to like a heavy DK / worsted weight yarn. But I was planning on making 2 slipover vests for my nieces for Christmas, which I have also completed and I've already wrapped up, so I'll show pictures of them here because they technically are completed garments. But before I did that, I had never knit buttons, like buttonholes or a button band, and I had never knit just like a slipover flat because this one is actually knit completely flat and then it closes with buttons. So I was just a little worried to cast one on and knit, and I didn't want the finished piece to look kind of like unpolished, and then because they were going to be gifts. So I figured, okay, I have a lot of this black yarn left. Let me just knit one for myself as like a test, and then I can do it once from beginning to finish, and then I can use like the actual nicer yarn that I purchased for my nieces to do theirs. And I'm glad I did. I don't think you need to. I think if you're like an adventurous beginner, intermediate, for sure you're good to go with this, but even if you're like a beginner / adventurous beginner, I think you could just cast this on and go. It's not actually that difficult, and Petite Knit does really good tutorials on the button bands and how to do it and stuff, so I didn't find that like too complicated and stuff. But yeah, so this is the one that I knit for myself. It's like a little cropped vest. I didn't bother to gauge swatch again because I was just going to use up this scrap yarn anyways. So I probably should have knitted maybe a size up to wear it as like a true vest, but I wanted it to be more of like a tank top look. So you can see the way I styled it in my photo. It's like a cropped little tank top, fun and flirty. I will probably just save this for my baby boy, because black is gender neutral. He can wear it with a lot of his outfits, I'm sure. I don't think I'll wear it again anytime soon just because it's like quite cropped, and I think just the styling of it, like my style is probably a little more mature than this, but I think it would be great for him as like an actual vest slipover, so I'm going to save it for him to wear. And like I just mentioned, I then knit both of the Lulu slipovers, one in a hot pink color. I can actually tell you, I believe, what color I used. So that color is the Sandisgarn Smart yarn in the color hot pink, and that's like the size 3 to 4-year-old, which I think she'll be able to grow into a little bit. The vest, the pullover is meant to be kind of a little oversized, so I'm glad she'll be able to wear it now through probably, hopefully, 6 or 7 years old. And then for my other niece, who is 2.5, about to turn, well, she's about to turn 3 in February. For her, I knitted hers in the Sandisgarn yarn Perfect in the color Jolly Blue. And I essentially just took them both and their mom to Mother Knitter and had them pick out what color they wanted within obviously the DK range. And Ember is obsessed with pink, so she picked out pink. And River, she's too young to really like know what was going on, but so I just kind of had her mom pick, so she picked this like electric blue. And I think the two of them together, like the bright pink and the bright blue, will look so cute. So I am so excited for them to open these up for Christmas and for them to try it on. And yeah, for River, the smaller niece, I knitted the size 1 to 2-year-old and I think it came out really well in the photos. So I'm excited for them to open these. And this most recent slipover I knit for myself. This is another petite knit pattern. This is the Sill or Seal Slipover, S-I-L-L-E, Sill Slipover. It's again an all over texture pattern done with knits and purls. It essentially has this kind of like triangular pattern and then this kind of checkered knit purl pattern, and it goes all the way through the front and the back. And then the edges are 2x2 rib, which was kind of nice. I'd never done 2x2 ribbing before, so that was kind of cool. And it's a completely charted pattern. It was a little complicated. I won't lie, the charts were a little confusing because you kind of have to do some chart math on your own. And that just means that like to a certain point, because the pattern just gets so big, you obviously can't chart the entire thing. And so there are certain sections where in the instructions, she just says knit according to pattern. And depending on where you're in at the pattern, if you're at the triangle one, it's a little confusing because you really have to count like, okay, how many knits until I need to purl? And then like, and once you get into the round, like it's just like a little confusing. So I'm glad that I waited until I was solidly in like the intermediate phase of my knitting to cast this on. But anyways, the yarn, sorry, I keep going into the pattern without telling you the yarn. The yarn that I chose is the Mayak Foco de Cashmere. And I believe this is in the color, what's this colorway? It was like at a yarn shop in Lugano, Switzerland. And so I don't even remember what the colorway was, but it was on sale. But it's like a mossy green color. And this is the first time I've ever worked with cashmere. And I decided to pick it up because usually cashmere yarn can be very expensive. So to purchase a sweater quantity, you know, you have to be willing to shell out anywhere from like $120 to like $200 for a sweater. And in her shop, she had 6 balls left, which is about 300 grams, because I think it's in 50-gram balls. So I was like 300 grams, which I thought was going to be enough for a Monday sweater. It definitely is not. And so I had originally cast this on to do a Monday sweater, but then by the time I got to like the yoke, I was like, okay, there's no way I'm finishing this sweater with this much yarn left. And so I ended up frogging it and looking for a vest pattern that I could do because I know for sure I had enough yarn for that. So I found this. I thought the green would really pop with the stitches, which they do. I think it looks really cute, and you can style it both ways. The armholes are quite big, and I don't know if that's, I mean, I think I met gauge, so it must just be the pattern has it so that it's meant to be like an actual slip over vest, but she wears it, I think, just on its own, not really like over anything. But if you're wearing a bra, like it's gonna show. So, you know, some people like that look. You wear like a bandeau if you want or something, but just to keep note, like the armhole is quite big, and I think that's the pattern. I don't think that was like me knitting it that way. So yeah, this is definitely more my style of a slipover versus like the Lulu one that I knit. So I definitely envision myself wearing this as just like a tank top or as a vest, and I've worn it as both. I actually wore this a few days ago into work as like a vest layer, and it's so nice and warm because it's 100% cashmere. We are in the home stretch, and the last category is accessories. And also, please, if I forgot any details in all of the last section over the last hour, I'm gonna blame it on pregnancy brain. But essentially you can count on, if I knit any pattern, it's most likely gonna be the smallest size, in case I didn't mention sizes for like the last few pieces. But now we are on to accessories. And the first accessory I actually don't have because it was a gift knit for my dear friend Charlene, so I will put a photo of it. But I knit the Romanticist bandana by Meredith Campbell. And you can see it just has like mostly stockinette with this cool kind of diamond eyelet pattern. And it's a little bandana. I used the leftover Sandiscarn yarn from my Monday sweater, so it's the same exact yarn of doing that. And I also did one less repeat of the triangle to create just a slightly smaller bandana. This also had an I-cord edge and an I-cord string, which was the first time I had done that, like just the string part. So that was kind of fun to knit. And yeah, I gifted to her for her birthday. I hope she still wears it. She actually quit her full-time job as a data scientist to pursue cooking. And so she does pop-up supper clubs in her apartment in Brooklyn. So if you are in the New York, Brooklyn, Queens, New York City area and you love pop-ups, I will put her website down below. I think she just came out with a new website where you can get supper club tickets, and it's amazing. She cooks Sichuan food from China. So it's like nice and spicy, and it's like very authentic Chinese cuisine. And I've had her cooking so many times over the years. It's amazing. But I thought like a little bandana would be cute because she wears a lot of like cotton bandanas when she cooks. And I don't imagine she would wear this when she cooks because it's probably kind of hot because it's like a wool yarn. But I just thought that would fit into her aesthetic. So I gifted that for her birthday this year. Next up, I have 2 Sophie scarves. I don't think this is surprising to anyone. I feel like as most knitters begin, like they will come across the Sophie scarf at some point, and it's a fan favorite for a reason. It's a great pattern. It's a great little scarf / project to have on your needles when you're in transit. It's a cute little gift knit because I think it looks so chic the way it's styled and stuff, yet it takes less time to knit than it looks. So I think it's like the perfect gift knit. So I have 2. This one is actually going to be a Christmas gift for one of my best friends. We decided to all do either homemade or thrifted Christmas gifts this year with my 2 best friends. So I'm really excited to gift this to her. And I actually knitted this in the same brown yarn as my Tombow tee. Again, sorry, it's not really showing up well on camera because it's just brown, but yeah, it's like a nice, I knit her the largest size. I think I've only ever knit the Sophie scarf in the larger size. But yeah, it's quite long, but it's meant to be worn so you can wrap it around like this and then tie it. I know it looks kind of crazy over my collar, but it's so cute. And I wanted to be safe and knit her something that wasn't 100% wool just in case her skin was sensitive to anything. So this is like that cotton yarn, and I can't wait to give it to her, and I think she'll really like this brown color because when I finished my Tombow tee, she had commented how much she loved that brown color, and in my head I was like, good, because you're getting that exact yarn but in a Sophie scarf. So I'm very excited to gift this to her soon. Then the other Sophie scarf I finished is, I actually finished on my trip to Switzerland because like I mentioned, I had only brought along my Cumulus tee to knit, and then by the time I finished it, we were yarn shopping a lot. Like I was going to a lot of yarn shops, and I ended up purchasing some of this yarn from Lana Grossa, which I want to say is a German brand, but correct me if I'm wrong. But this is in the Lana Grossa Cool Wool Vintage in the colorway 7368. There wasn't a name, so 7368. And yeah, like Lana Grossa, I haven't seen it readily available, at least in the yarn shops that I've been to in the US. So I think maybe it's more readily available in Europe, which makes sense if it's a German brand. You can definitely purchase it online, but it was cool to like go in person and see all the different variations that they have. And this is just like a lovely rustic looking yarn. It has this like slight color variation in it. I hope you can kind of see with the lighting. Sorry, I'm like kind of far away from the camera actually, but I think you can kind of see it, and I'll try to put photos of everything so you can see what it looks like in like daylight. But yeah, I actually had to knit this with smaller needles because I only brought my Cumulus tee. So I actually knit this on 3mm needles instead of 3.5. So it's slightly smaller than what it's supposed to be, I believe, because like compared to this, I mean, it's actually not that much smaller, but you can tell it's like a little smaller than this one is pretty much met gauge. But I figured the yarn itself was like, at that point I just wanted to keep knitting something because we had a few days of the trip left and I had finished my Cumulus tee. So I was like, well, I'd rather knit something than not. And I figured a Sophie scarf was something safe where like, even if you don't quite meet gauge, you can still knit it and wear it. And because the yarn is kind of stretchy, I can definitely still wear it like this. And I actually wore it into work a few weeks ago, and all my coworkers were like, that scarf is so cute, like, where'd you get it? And I was like, I made it. And they all know that I knit, so they were all like, oh my god, it looks so good. So yeah, I have this little Sophie scarf for myself. Next up is a hat, and this is another extremely popular pattern. This is the Musselburgh hat by, what's her name? By Yiselda Teague. Yiselda or Yisolda, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that name. I believe this is the most popular hat pattern on Ravelry, and apparently when it first came out, it was like the Sophie scarf. It just took the knitting world by storm, and people were like, oh my god. So the hallmark feature of this pattern is that it is swatchless, and she gives you options on different gauges as you knit. So essentially you cast on, you start knitting at about 1 inch of length. She has you count your stitch count, and then depending on that to follow the directions for what size you want to make. I hope that makes sense. I had this beautiful fingering weight sock yarn that I actually won in a giveaway. It's by the Farmer's Daughter, and I don't remember, it was kind of hard to tell on the label all the different information that they had, because I think this is like a smaller yarn dyer brand, but it is their sock yarn. But they have so many different sock yarn variations. I'm not quite sure what it was, because I think it was like a limited edition colorway in the color I ride my, what is it? Sorry. In the color I ride my bike or something like that. Again, it was like hard to tell what the actual information was on the label, but I believe it's basically like 80% merino wool, 20% nylon, which is pretty standard in a sock yarn. And it's in, again, this beautiful hand-dyed blue color with some flecks of like deeper blue through it. And I got a whole hank of it, and I just wasn't quite sure what to knit with it. I have not been interested really in knitting socks, and so I just kind of had it in my stash for a long time. And then when I saw Amy from Knee Knits talk about, I think she was either talking about gift knits or her beanie collection, she talked about the Musselburgh hat and how much she loved that pattern, and I was really drawn to it because it uses, it technically uses any weight yarn, but the majority, and I think the best looking versions of this hat, are done with a fingering weight sock yarn. That's what a lot of people online tend to knit it with, and I was like, perfect, I have this sock yarn that I don't know what to do with. So I cast it on, I was knitting to the increases, and then I was like, okay, do I keep knitting this so that it's for myself, or do I knit a little baby hat for my son? So I ended up deciding to knit the baby size, and I did pretty much meet gauge with this. So I would say this is not a newborn size beanie. This is definitely more like 6 to 8 month size, even though it just says baby, but don't think newborn, because this is definitely bigger than like a newborn would wear. But I cannot wait to put him in this hat. It's so soft, and I just love the fabric that the fingering weight yarn creates. I think I did this on 2.5 millimeter needles, which is my smallest gauge I've ever worked with. But again, it just creates this like beautiful fabric, and I'm like, now I want a shirt in this, but the thought of knitting an entire garment with 2.5 millimeter needles makes me want to like not do it. So maybe I just have to knit Musselburgh hats with this, but I think it just came out so cute. And in case you're interested, this is what it actually looks like, which is, looks wild. It's a big oval, and then the way you wear it is you kind of finagle it and tuck it in on itself so that it has now a double layer of fingering weight wool. And then you can either just wear it like this, like a beanie with no brim, or you can wear it with the brim. And she gives so many different customizable options. So technically it is completely reversible, and so there's so many variations of people online knitting it with different combinations of yarn, so that you can knit it so that it's like one side is blue, one side is pink, or like this side is blue with like a black brim, and like there are just so many combinations to this pattern. So I can see why it's like one of the most popular, if not the most popular, beanie pattern on Ravelry. It's a really great pattern. I already have another one on the needles for myself that I'm knitting with the leftover yarn from the Cumulus tee, so we'll kind of have like matching beanies. But yeah, just a really great hat pattern, and I'm really glad that I cast it on and knit it, because it's just been really fun to see it. And it's such a little cute little hat for my baby, and this is the first thing I've made for him, so very exciting little knits. After knitting that beanie, I came across this fingerless glove pattern and I was kind of intrigued. Like I said, I've never been interested in knitting socks, and I think the reason for that is I'm super particular with the way my socks fit, and I finally have now found my like perfect combo of socks that I wear depending on what shoes I'm wearing. I don't think I'm unique in that. And so the thought of like putting so much effort into knitting a pair of socks just to like have them not fit perfectly really scares me. And so I don't think I'll never knit socks, never say never, but that's probably like the least interested I am in a garment is like socks. They're at the bottom of the list. So I had not really thought about accessory knitting really. Like again, that hat, like the Sophie scarves I do think of as accessories, but I almost think of scarves as like a separate category for some reason. But once I did that hat, I was like, ooh, like it's kind of satisfying to finish something in a week, you know, or less in a few days. And so I saw this fingerless pattern by Iris, I think. Yeah, Iris H. This is a free pattern, super basic construction. Like now that I've knit this once, I could probably even knit it again without even reading the pattern. It's so simple and great stash buster. So at the time I was looking to really pare down some of my yarns because I tend to overbuy yarn, especially in the earlier phases. So this is actually the same Sandisgarn Double Sunday yarn that I knit my Ingrid sweater in. And I ended up purchasing so much extra yarn that I just had like not quite enough for, you know, like a full garment, maybe enough for like a Sophie scarf or something, but I just thought that would be the perfect yarn to try out these fingerless gloves. And I really like them. I think, you know, the Double Sunday yarn is so soft and a little stretchy, so it creates this like perfect little look. And I think the bright red is great for Christmas. I did mess up the row count though on this second pair. So one pair like sits a lot taller than the other. Like if you can see, like that's the difference. It looks kind of funny. So it's fine. Like maybe like not enough for me to like frog these completely and re-knit them. But I just thought that was funny that I was like trying to count the correct number of rows and I definitely did not, and then did not bother to measure the second pair. So they're super wonky, but I am still proud of them. I do still like the way they turned out. So much so that I knitted a second pair for my mother-in-law. Those are also already wrapped in Christmas paper, so I'll just put a photo of what they look like. And the yarn that I used for that is, let's see, this is not in my Ravelry. It's the Barocco yarn. It's their Ultra Wool DK, I believe in the color Forget Me Not or 83162. And this is a 100% superwash wool. Yes, superwash wool, DK weight. The stitch gauge is about 23 times 30 on 4mm needles, but I feel like 4mm needles gives it a pretty wide stitch look. So I think actually if I were to knit a garment in this, I would probably knit it with like 3.5mm needles, but maybe that's just me. But I knit her a pair of gloves in the size up from mine, and I'm hoping they will fit her well. So that's just like a little extra Christmas gift that I decided to gift her. And my mom saw these today and she was like, I want a pair too. So I will probably knit her a pair as well in the near future. So definitely more fingerless glove knitting in my future. And I don't have any desire to knit like finger gloves, because even just doing the thumb, I was like, it was killing me, like doing it with magic loop. I'll probably do them on DPNs this next time around. But doing magic loop with the thumbs, I was like, oh, it's like so frustrating. So the thought of having to do 4 more of those fingers, I can't. So I actually also don't love gloves because then they don't have the touch screen capability. So I have a pair of like nice leather gloves that have the touch screen capability. And then I think for every day kind of on the go, I'll probably just wear gloves like this because it's just easier to use your phone and stuff and it's not quite as restrictive. So yeah. Now we are to the last piece that I have completed. I actually do have another Sophie scarf on my needles as a gift, and I'm pretty sure I will complete that before the new year, but I'm not going to show you because it's technically not done, even though I'm pretty sure I will finish it before 2024 is over. But this is the last actual finished piece that is still being blocked because it still has a bit to dry, but I still wanted to show it because I think that technically still counts as finished. But this is the Oslo hat by Petite Knit. And I'm knitting this in the size medium, which she designates as the women's size. So the way she does the sizing for this is, let's see, it's extra small, small, medium, and large, but it's equivalent to baby, junior/woman, woman, and then man. So for myself, I definitely would have done the small size. This is for my boss, and she claims that she has a big head. I don't think she has a much larger head than me, but when she said that, I was like, okay, well then I'm gonna knit you the medium size, which technically is like the women's size. And she also has like short hair like me, but it's really curly. So I actually think knitting her a size up is fine because it'll just fit over her hair a little bit better and it won't like really smush it down too much. But I just think this looks massive. Like this looks huge. Pre-blocking, my husband tried it on quickly and it looked like it fit him well. And he actually has like kind of a slightly smaller head than average, I would say. So that made me think like, oh, okay, I think it looks good. But then when I washed it, it really bloomed. And I'm like, why is it so big? So I don't know. She doesn't quite, I mean, she does technically have a gauge on here. And I do think I met gauge because I use the exact yarn and needles that she uses, which is Sunday Held Double. So I used the Sunday Held Double in the color, what color did I use? It's actually very similar to that Perfect yarn by Sandnes Yarn that I knit my niece's vest in. But yeah, this is in the color Electric Blue. So yeah, and I knit very similarly to Petite Knit's gauge, especially if I use the same yarn and needles. So I'm pretty sure I met gauge. It just looks massive for some reason, but I'm gonna trust the process. I already showed her like a little preview of it, and I told her once we get back from the break, if she tries it on and it's too big, I would rather than give this to Alex because I already know it fits him, and then I'll just knit her the same one just in a size smaller. So yeah, but I finished that. It's constructed actually from the brim up, whereas like the muscle burrow is from the top down and then you do decreases again. So yeah, it was a pretty quick knit. I think if you were knitting, you know, just casually, you could definitely finish it within a week. I actually finished this in a day and a half because all day yesterday, all we did was sit inside and watch football because the weather's just crap here in New Jersey right now. So I had hours of knitting and I was able to finish it. But I think on average, my usual knitting schedule, I could probably finish it within like 4 to 5 days. But kind of nice that I was able to technically finish it in like a day and a half. And it has a double folded brim, and then you knit the rest of the beanie in like the stockinette stitch, and then you do decreases at the top with DPNs and you finish off. And I really enjoyed this knitting process. I'm definitely gonna knit myself an Oslo hat once I finish with my own Musselburgh hat. I think the appeal to the Oslo hat is you can use a DK weight yarn, so it's a little bit warmer, but also you don't have to knit like an entire oblong shape like the Musselburgh. Like the Musselburgh, especially if you're doing fingering weight, it's just so much knitting, which is like in and of itself nice and like a pro and a con, but I think the Oslo hat is a little more accessible if you want to finish something quicker. Like the Musselburgh hat is definitely going to take me like more than a few weeks to finish just because it's like in stockinette fingering weight. But they just give different looks to each. So yeah, I'm interested to see what an Oslo hat for myself would look like and how they might compare and contrast. And I'm sure I'll talk about that in like one of my actual podcast videos of how they compare. But that is my last knitted object of 2024. I don't know what the total count is here, but I will put the total count of like garments and accessories here on the screen maybe to do a little tally. I'm really proud of myself. Like I said, I really dove super deep into knitting, and I don't think this is like a realistic pattern even for myself to keep up with, especially with like a newborn coming in 2025. I don't think I'll be able to knit nearly as many garments next year, but maybe I will. I don't know. Like this year, even though I started in April, I technically didn't knit for like 2 months straight because I was so sick in my first trimester and tired that I just like couldn't bother to even knit. So technically it's really only been like 6 months of fully knitting. And I will also put another caveat here at the end that like when I commute into the city for work, it's a 4-hour total commute. So it's 2 hours there, 2 hours back. So a lot of this knitting was done on the train. You know, that's like 4 hours of knitting a day when I was commuting in twice a week. So that was a big chunk of knitting. Also, Alex and I, we tend to just hang around the house on Sundays. That's usually our day to like run errands, maybe get brunch or lunch with the family. But for the most part, we're kind of like watching football or just hanging out. So that's like when I knit a lot. And we also usually watch at least like an hour of TV a night on weekdays where we're watching like an episode of something, maybe 2 episodes of something. So there's another like hour or two. So I'm always knitting during those times. So I feel like I did accomplish a lot of knitting, but I did have a lot of like knitting time off. And obviously when we're on vacation, I'm knitting, you know, on the flight there, on the flight back, yada, yada. So yeah, it's just been a great hobby to pick up because you can really do it anywhere on the go. And especially if you get to the point where you can knit without looking, which I'm not quite there yet, but I'm like halfway there, like, and kind of like not look while I'm knitting, then even more so, you know, you can do that while watching a movie or in a car, or, you know, the options are endless. So I've just really, really, really been enjoying knitting, and I'm so glad that I picked it up. I can't wait to see what I'm able to accomplish next year. Like I said, probably the next video up will be my 2025 knitting plans, if not my podcast. So one or the other. But please subscribe if you are interested in more traditional knitting podcast episodes. That's kind of the bulk of what I do here. Follow me on Instagram down below. That's like my knitting specific Instagram. And I also always link my Ravelry page down below, which I'm hoping to keep better records on in 2025. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this extra long video, and I'll see you in the new year. Bye.